Welcome to another episode of Tri Talk. Today, with me, as ever, is my wonderful co host, Scott Anderson. And we have a very special guest with us today. Our guest is a coach of Scott's. I'll let Scott actually do the introduction and tell you guys what the entire episode is going to be about. So, go ahead.
Yeah, very well. We're recording this on Boxing Day. Hence, for everybody who's watching this on YouTube, Ollie's got a funny Santa hat on. We have Felix with us today. He's my coach on Instagram. It's at Felix Koebcke, but you'll give this man a follow. And we wanted to do this episode for quite some time, actually, because I think most people who do XTERRA have always wondered how training for an XTERRA is different than for a regular triathlon, and all sorts of variations of that question. And we are here to talk about Felix and his coaching, of course, but we're also here to shed some light on the topic of training for XTERRA. I guess that summarizes it pretty well.
So, maybe Felix, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
We've had a brief interaction before where notoriously my internet was completely terrible and cut out in the middle of it for multiple minutes because my dad
It hasn't improved since.
It has not improved. The thing is, okay, I won't describe my internet issues anyway. Felix, why are you on the podcast? You're Scott's coach. How did this relationship come to be? Where did you meet Scott, and what do you do with him?
That's actually something that makes me reach out to many years back. As you could already see, I was already also doing triathlon myself back in the days, actually together with Scott in Krefeld, where I'm right now, which is in beautiful Germany, where we are both from. And Scott moved here to, I think you started your studies in Krefeld, right?
Yeah.
So
2014 is over 10 years ago, actually.
Yeah, we're getting old. And I'm actually born here, so we both met at the local triathlon club, and that's how everything evolved. I was also racing in the second Bundesliga, as Scott was doing as well, and he then got into XTERRA. I was a bit, let's say, too bad technically in mountain biking, and I was probably a better swimmer and runner than cyclist, so I decided to stay in the second Bundesliga. And at some point in my life, I decided to also study sports because that was basically what my whole life was about. And so I have a big passion and also understanding what is the physiology or the biomechanics behind what we are doing in this beautiful sport. I'm mainly focused in endurance sports as well. So that's how I got also into coaching, I guess. At first, I wasn't really into getting that big into coaching, but at some point, I think it just kicked off. And then to cut it short, at some point, Scott, I think it was 1 year or a bit more than 1 year ago, decided to ask me if I would to coach him. There are also some steps that were before. So, for example, I'm now at my master's and I coached some more people before Scott. And I'm also working with the local or the regional federation which is called North Rhine-Westphalia. So it's basically, is it a district in English, Scott, or what is the correct word?
I think I always have trouble explaining this to people who are not from Germany. So you know how like a national federation will have like a national team of different age groups. So they'll have like a juniors team, a under 23 team, etc., etc. For everything up until junior level, these kind of national teams, so to speak, are divided into the individual states because Germany is made up of different states and each state has its own state triathlon federation, and then there's a national federation. And within that state federation is where Felix is now coaching.
Yeah, so basically, I started this about 3 years ago during my bachelor still, and yeah, this is kind of how everything evolved, and now I'm here. So there wasn't really a big plan behind it, but I take it as it goes, and I really like it, and I really enjoy, especially working with Scott, of course, because he's also a good friend of mine. So yeah, I think
Maybe
that's
my question would be first, you obviously competed yourself, right?
yeah.
Similarly to Scott, as Scott still does. Do you still compete? And second, what's the relationship between that athlete in you and the coach, right? Do you try to coach yourself? Where do you get inspiration from? And how do you
Yeah.
manage the relationship between essentially those two beings, within you?
I was First question was if I still compete. I would say barely. So I haven't done a triathlon since 2 years, but I'm planning on coming back. But I decided to
It's
take a break
XTERRA in
because
2026 is what
World
it's asking for.
Championships.
yeah, we will come to that as I think as well, but at a later stage in this podcast. So I used to do second Bundesliga until I was 22, and I did some middle distance racing as well. But at some point, I decided to take a break because I couldn't do three sports besides my job and studying as well. So I decided to cut it just on running and maybe also have a bit of fun in my life. um, so this is my current situation. I'm trying to stay fit and try a lot of things, but I'm not competing myself. But to get to your second question, I think it is very important as a coach to still be active and also feel what you experience during training or also during racing, maybe at some point. So yeah, I think Scott is laughing now because it's reminding himself of us doing a heat session some weeks ago.
That's exactly what I was
Yeah.
thinking about. Yeah.
Um,
So to tell
yeah.
that story real quick, I occasionally do some heat training. We don't have to really
Yeah.
get into the details here, but obviously a coach should know what that feels like. So I brought
Yeah.
a heat suit to him some time, and I just watched him suffer on the turbo and sweat his ass off. It was yeah,
That's
Yeah. It
brutal.
was
an enlightening experience, I would say.
it was insane. Yeah. I it was really interesting and also really hard, and you can really feel the load afterwards, which was also interesting. Um, but yeah, I think this is a very important part of the job as a coach, that you also kind of know what you give your athletes to work with. And also when I'm, for example, swimming myself, I have so many ideas, for example, technical drills or how I would describe a set to an athlete. So I think, yeah, you should definitely still be somehow active, maybe not compete, but yeah.
Do you think being a coach and like take that swimming example, um, do you think being a coach has changed the way you look at specific training, so to speak? So like if you said you were swimming and you immediately think of some technical drills, I don't think that's something the average athlete would do, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think especially with swimming, it's also related to how I was as an athlete, because I really enjoyed swimming for myself alone, and I got really good at it when I was alone because I could really feel my stroke and get good at technical drills and working the technical drills into my actual swimming stroke and stuff like that. So I don't know if every athlete is doing that, but
No.
yeah,
From experience, I
I
can
feel
tell you
like
no.
from my experience working with Scott, I think that's actually something we try to work on, and yeah, so maybe that's just me, and maybe that's also why I became a coach. But yeah, that's my opinion on that.
What um well, so I know this obviously from personal experience because I know you
Yeah.
quite well, but you have a strong interest in science. I mean, we've spoiled that on Instagram as well, and I think that also shows in the things you just said as right, right, like you putting on a heat suit and actually trying
Stupid.
out what it feels like, and then trying to analyze what happens after. Like you said, you can feel the load afterwards. But I also know that, like you, for example, you bought a lactate scout and you used it on yourself in training quite a bit to figure out how things work, etc. Where does that strong interest in science and science-based training come from with you?
That's actually a good question. So I would say, especially back in school, I wasn't really good at chemistry or physics or anything. But as soon as I combine all that stuff with sports, I get a huge interest in that. So, for example, how is the physiology behind performance was my first interest, and then somehow I got into, okay, there are way more parts in the whole game that make up a good athlete and also a healthy athlete. And yeah, somehow this all whole interest developed, and I got into way more topics because of that. And also, I like to experience things myself, so that's why I bought the lactate meter. Yeah, we also try to use it with Scott, but because he's living far, yeah, I think it's like 3 hours away from me, we cannot do it on a regular basis. But as he knows, we do a lot of physiological tests as well, or metabolic tests, to assess his physiology and how we want to change it. Yeah, but I think it was just because of my studies in general. So that's I think the reason, and also I think because as you can see it with the Norwegians, it's I think the way to go, or at least one way to go.
So maybe you've teased this a little bit right now by opening the topic of the Norwegians and
Yeah,
talking about a scientific approach. But what is the general approach you take to training? So let's maybe focus on
good
that before
question.
we
Yeah,
get to the XTERRA stuff.
good question. I think my general approach to training is kind of shaped by how that I view the that I always try to have a look on the physiological underlining of a performance. So that basically means I try to not look first at the power. I try to look at which determinants do I need to create a certain output out of the body. So how, for example, one determinant would be the VO2 max, the fat oxidation rate, stuff like that. And that all sounds very theoretical, I think. And everyone feels like, okay, what the fuck is this scientist telling me? But it's actually quite helpful to work with these tools. For example, you can do a basic performance diagnostic, and then you have a way better approach to, for example, zone 2 training than if you would just do a FTP test or a RAM test on Swift. And I think when we work with our body, we have a far better output, and we train more effectively than when we try to work against it. And I think that's what the most athletes actually do. They feel like, okay, they first have a look on what do I want to achieve, and then they would think, okay, then I have to have this zone 2, and I don't know, ride at 250 watts, but they actually just can do 200, and then they have a problem. So yeah, I would basically say that's, to cut it short, you have to work with your body and try to know what is your zones, or what are your zones, and then you will have a better result in the end.
So if I understand it correctly, basically, if you're looking at an engine, you have
Yeah.
an engine that exists in its current state, and you look at the engine and you start optimizing the engine for its
Oh,
performance,
that's
rather
very good.
than looking at, okay, I want to go a certain speed and then looking back at the engine, right? So
Exactly.
does that make sense? Is that right? What you're, yeah.
So yeah, that's a very good image. So if you would work with that image, the guy that was riding at 250 watts would burn more fuel than he has in his tank, and then he's always burned out. And the guy who is riding at 200 watts will come slower to the next gas station, but he will reach the next gas station, and then will and the guy with 250 watts probably not. So that's probably the image that you just created. Yeah.
So
A very specific example.
right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about engines, right? So we have an example of an engine here. It's on my right. Maybe it's your guys' left. Is Scott.
For me, it's also on my right.
So Scott came to you last year, and he
Exactly.
told you, okay, let's go train it for XTERRA racing. And so first, XTERRA racing is very different. That's kind of the first question is, how did you understand that XTERRA racing was different? And second, what was the general approach that you took with Scott, right? So what did you identify within this engine of Scott's?
So at first, also, I thought XTERRA racing has to be very different, and you probably have to do loads of different stuff than, for example, in short track racing or whatever. But I think it depends. So you have the determinants in XTERRA racing are, for example, how good is your technique in mountain biking, how good are you at cross running, but obviously also your physiological determinants, like how good is your threshold and your zone, where's your zone 2 or LT1, whatever you want to call it. So from the talks that I had with Scott and also with other people as well, I noticed that at some point there's not that big difference to, for example, middle distance racing, because when you have a look on how long the race actually is quite similar to middle distance racing, but obviously you have a lot of short bursts depending on the course, or what you also would have is a lot of downhills which are technical, which they are basically not existent in middle distance racing. So that's something you have to, I think, individualize. So it's always depending on how is the athlete, or what is the athlete giving you, or what is he coming with. It's maybe a better explanation. So in Scott's terms, I think you did downhill before you did triathlon. So he was already
ages ago.
he was already very good at technically at cycling, I think.
I think that's the first time anyone's ever said that. Just to put this into perspective, right? Not to say, I'm not saying here that Felix is totally wrong. I'm just saying that I think there are a lot of people in the XTERRA world that can handle a mountain bike better than I do. But technical skills are not my number one problem. Let's put it that way.
But also not an issue. But also not an issue of yours.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's always depending on who you're measuring yourself with. Obviously, there are people who are way better mountain bikers than Scott, but I think that's something he can work with. So it's not like I have to be the technical coach who is going with him to the bike park and showing him how to do lanes, because probably then I would also be the wrong coach for him.
You would probably end up in hospital pretty quickly given your history of mountain biking.
But so in Scott's case, we try to focus first on some different parameters. For example, from our opinion, we had to develop his skills or his determinants, which would be like his general threshold. We thought it was too low, or it could be higher, because what happens then is that his fat oxidation would also be higher, and he would be able to ride longer and faster, which is basically the goal at XTERRA, that you can hammer the whole track at the highest speed. So in his case, as he was last year, he was not able to do the first pack, if you could say so, and
in the
so
swim,
decided,
that is right.
Yeah, in the swim. and then we decided we want to work first on that he's doing the first on the front pack, and we also wanted that he's able to hold it, or like we decided to do it more like a time trial, right, Scott?
Yeah, so I think I know what you mean. Let me try and explain this a little bit
Yeah,
more in detail, because I think this is a very good example of what you meant when you said it's very individual. Because in XTERRA elite racing, the race dynamics depend very strongly on who's racing. And at the beginning of, so 2 seasons ago, and at the beginning of last season, we thought that I often miss out the front group on the swim, but I'm also ahead of the group behind me, so I'm stuck somewhere in the
yeah,
middle. So it made more sense to us to invest in the swimming to get me to try and catch the front group. However, that decision, if you just look at the numbers, doesn't make much sense without this context, because swimming is inarguably the smallest portion of the race. So to invest a lot of work into that doesn't make sense if you do not have this specific context. And that's exactly why it
yeah.
is individual, right?
So yeah, this would be our goal for the swim part. For the bike part, we decided we, of course, want to improve him, and we especially want to improve his threshold so he could sustain a longer power output for a longer time. But in this case, we assumed that he would not be able to stay with the first group for a long time, because people like Jens Emil would be way out of his league at this point. Maybe this changes.
I doubt it. I wish it would.
So we decided to do it more like a time trial, so that he would not need to be able to do a lot of short bursts, but he would be able to sustain a very straight power output, or a very sustainable power output for a long time. For the run, it's basically the same. You want to be able to do these short bursts. So we also did some hill sprinting, or he also does a lot of short, intense running intervals, but also a lot of longer sessions to build his aerobic base. Yeah. So
What
this is
would
basically
you?
was our approach. Yeah.
I mean, we've just talked about that this approach is very individual and it depends
Yeah.
much on the athlete, probably more so than if you would compare it to road triathlon. What do you think are the main? I'm wondering how to phrase this question. What are the qualities that an athlete needs to be good in XTERRA in a very general sense? If you could compare a good athlete in 70.3 and compare a good athlete in XTERRA, what are the main differences?
I think that's an interesting question, especially looking at people like Jens, or I think also Solène. She was actually quite good at Bayer this year, I think. And Jens is trying to do the same step as well. So I'm not that sure. I think a lot of stuff is not that different. So you still have to have a very high threshold, and I think in mountain biking or Xterra, you probably have to have a higher VO2 max as well, so you can do those shorter stuff as well, or especially also the short track racing, which we haven't talked about yet. But besides that, I think it's a lot of technical stuff that you don't have in Ironman or middle distance racing. So I would say that's the main difference between the two disciplines in triathlon. What's your opinion, Scott or Ollie?
I'm not sure. I think this is an ever ongoing discussion.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's because this question came up on Instagram, and I know that people have asked this question in the past. Say, for a regular age group athlete who races a few XTERRA races in his season, but he also races, say, a few middle distance races, right? You know, like average, let's call him average Joe, for example.
The average
What
Joe.
would you say this person would have to do in his training to maybe yeah, I don't know. Let's try and answer that question, because I think that is what most people will be interested in.
And
Yeah,
maybe if we can have a session recommendation, and it doesn't have to be for all three, but if you have one session recommendation for any of the
yeah, let's go.
disciplines.
Is it? I would say it depends on the part of the season, but for the winter, I would still do a lot of VO2 max drills, or I would try to figure out what is my biggest problem. So obviously, you always have to do a high volume in training. I think there's no way around a high volume, even though a lot of coaches try to sell that. So that's the first step. Then what I would work with is probably, because it works in both disciplines, a lot of threshold work, but a lot of threshold work is always built on a base, probably on a lot of VO2 max stuff. So when your VO2 max is high, then you can build up your threshold. And I think this is always like, first you build up that, then this comes back. And this is, I think, how you work your way forward to this 90 milliliters Christian Blumenfeld VO2 max. Because I think if you're not able to eliminate the lactate, then you will not ever reach this high numbers of 90 milliliters. I think Oli is frozen. No, he's back. And this is why it is always working with each other. So for a session recommendation, I would try to ask you a question: when? Now, or
let's
before
say
XTERRA or whatever?
yeah, let's say one of them. Let's say in the off season, and
the
one
off-season.
in spring when I'm getting ready for some of my races.
In the off season, you should have some pints at the local bar.
I think Ollie's
train.
trying to snag some free training tips so he can win the Iron Dumpling again in summer.
What is that?
Well, that's a race we organize. You're invited to come if you want. It's quite close to Germany. It's about
Is it
20
fun?
kilometers away from the German border, from Dresden. Not very far.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like the other end of the country for you, Felix.
Yeah. Yeah, but
It's a mere 8-hour
last
drive.
season I missed out on XTERRA Prague, or XTERRA Czech. So
If you come, you can start for free, and you'll get a T-shirt.
God, I get a T-shirt.
Oh shit! We have to maybe we'll put it in the calendar. We will see.
Definitely, I will put it in Scott's race calendar as well.
No, but let's say in
Yeah.
the winter. Let's say in the winter.
Yeah, so in the winter and in the in spring. So what I would start with is always some high intensity workouts after probably a bit of base work. But I would say I start quite early with VO2 max as well, because I not like really hard VO2 max stuff, but I try to build it up. Then I would do some stuff like 30-15s, so 30 seconds high intense and then 15 seconds easier. Yeah, Ollie doesn't
That's disgusting.
Yeah,
Oh, I used to do 30-30s, and 30-15s just is
yeah,
like
30
terrible.
It's depending on how good you already are. So
I'm not very
what
good.
your training level, then you should start with 30-30s.
Okay.
That's like the easier one.
I think Ollie should do 30-15s and just have a 30-second effort and then a 15-minute break in between.
It sounds more like my level.
No, I'm just taking the piss.
Yeah. So that's something I would start with, and I think it actually can be quite fun. You just have to enjoy the pain. And what you should also do is some longer intervals, for example, the classic 4x4 minutes would be something for spring, or you could also do some threshold work, always depending on what's your level there. I think I would do the biggest set we have done in the past was something like 6 or 7 times 10 minutes, but that's already a lot. If you go on some Instagram posts from the Norwegian boys, they would do it like 16 times. So you can try it yourself also on that. But I think when you manage to do like 3 to 5 times 10 minutes on the bike, that's already good, solid work, especially when you do it in the right zone. So a lot of people try to overestimate where their threshold is. And that's, I think, where the issue usually comes from. So you should be able to sustain it and feel good afterwards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense.
So to answer the question, what people should do to train for XTERRA is buy a
Oh, yeah.
biology textbook and just learn about human physiology. That's the first thing you need to do.
Yeah.
No. I think we answered that question pretty well. Let me to round this off real quick. I'll try and summarize it for I don't want to say stupid people like me, but I've said it regardless, so that's what it is. I think for people who want to do middle distance and XTERRA, it's very, very similar training. And
Yeah.
the only thing you could do if you want to specifically prepare for XTERRA, I think, are some specific sessions like ride your mountain bike to brush up your technical skills and maybe do some race-specific things like a brick run off the mountain bike maybe. Otherwise, the physical requirements they're not the same, but they're also not worlds apart, right?
I think that's very good. Especially
Oh,
like
so good.
what you should train is like TT position or mountain biking. I think what I can say is that with Scott, for example, we try to do a lot of zone 2 mountain bike training, because we felt like when he would do 4 to 5 hours on the mountain bike, very easy riding, this would also have an interesting effect on his performance, because usually with mountain biking you wouldn't do that, right? So this may be also something very interesting. So a lot of people they rush up the mountain and then they go downhill, pedaling not at all. So but what, especially from a training or a coach perspective, probably is also interesting to work in the position that you're racing in at a moderate level, because this would be something that a lot of middle distance triathletes would do in their training the whole winter to be better, but nobody would do it on a mountain bike.
True, yeah. I don't think a lot of people do that. 5-hour indoor ride on the mountain bike. There you go.
Oh God.
That's brutal. But what percentage of your training would you recommend that an athlete do at least if I'm racing on my mountain bike, right? So
that's a good
how much
question.
is Scott spending on the road?
In winter, he's doing a lot of stuff on the turbo, but last winter we tried to do exactly what I told you on the mountain bike as well. But it's always, in his case, it's always depending on, is there snow, or, for example, is he on a training camp? In January he was at Fuerteventura, so obviously he had no mountain bike at all. So he was only riding his road bike. I think it's always depending on what you can do. But I would try to say, when you are good at mountain biking and you foremost have to train physiological markers, then it's not that relevant.
I think Ollie wanted a very simple answer, which is in the winter when we did base training, I did a lot of stuff on the road because of the facts that Felix said. I had my turbo, I was on a training camp with only the road bike. But as the season progressed and got closer to racing, my volume shifted towards riding much more on the mountain bike, where to a point where I did almost 90% of my training on the mountain bike, probably.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's a good answer. But it's always depending on what you try to train. If you're very shit on your mountain bike, then you should do 90% the whole winter.
True.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great advice. Thank you.
Maybe to round off some specific questions to you and me, Felix. I'm just looking on my phone here because I've got written down what is the summary of this season? Like what
Yeah.
went really well, what went wrong, what did we learn? What's the takeaway?
Should I answer first, or do you want to also give your opinion?
I'm not going to answer anything because I don't want to give anything away that the coach doesn't want me to tell the public. So I'll leave this question entirely to you.
I don't have that many secrets. It's fine. But yeah, I think it was very interesting. I also remember that we had a talk before the season where I met Ollie the first time.
True, it
And
was actually, this is,
yeah,
I just want to tell this story because it's quite funny. That was while I was away on a training camp in,
I think it was
where
in
was I?
Malaga, right?
In
Or
Malaga,
Marbella.
yeah. And we were stuck in the pool because we were running
Really?
quite late. And then I was stood at the side of the street waiting for an Uber with no headphones, trying to have a voice or a video, like a
Yeah.
Zoom meeting with Felix and Oliver in the back of a taxi with a shouting and hectic taxi driver navigating the traffic. It was hectic.
And to contribute to this, my Wi-Fi decided to just kind of stop work. Well, it wasn't my Wi-Fi; it was my dad decided to start watching something on the Wi-Fi, and the Wi-Fi can't handle more than one person using it, and so my Wi-Fi just stopped working completely in the middle of the call. And it was a terrible disaster.
Yeah, so basically I
Right.
had a meeting with myself, so we can just cut it short, yeah.
Yes, basically.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, I remember that talk quite good, and Ollie also did his analysis on what he would be expecting. Obviously, you also had your expectations, and I had a bit mixed feelings about everything. Obviously, I wanted you to perform at your best, but I think it wasn't your first season as a pro, but in your general life, there were a lot of things changing. And I'm not sure if everyone on the podcast knows that, but you just did your PhD. So this is
We
a
talked
big
about
thing.
that last week. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, nice. And I think this is something, obviously, that's also a big part in coaching, that you understand what is the life around the training of an athlete, and I think this is actually something that can have a big impact on your performance as well. And that's obviously something we cannot always control, and that's I cannot write into Training Peaks, and I do not want to write into Training Peaks. So yeah, I think this year was kind of interesting for you as well, or you can maybe also give your take on that, because there were a lot of things changing outside of the sport, and also I think the fact that you fully went into XTERRA racing was different than to the years before. So there were a lot of just this is maybe the setting that you were in. So to get back to your question, I think you did very good in most parts, and you especially learned a lot. So and yeah, I think in general you were very stable in your results, which I would say is also something that an athlete should achieve.
I'm
And
just going to re-listen to this part of the episode whenever I feel down. I
yeah,
just have my coach telling me, "Oh, you did really well."
yeah, and yeah, I think the next step should be that you just raise the level that you had this year again, and then I think you will be very good next year. Right? What's your
Yeah,
opinion
yeah.
on that?
I think, I mean, yeah. I kind of went into this season hoping to basically be able to only focus on training and like eliminate all external disturbances. But as we now know, that didn't work out at all. I basically, at any time throughout the year, I was very occupied with other things as well that also stressed me out. And I think stress is a good keyword here, because one of the
Yeah,
things that really
definitely.
did not go well at all, which had nothing to do with the training or the fitness actually, was managing all of the stress that a full season of racing, the World Cup, put on me, which a lot of that was travel. I had a few races where I actually was quite sick, probably because of the travel. And yeah, even some training camps that I did were not ideal from a stress perspective on like all of the surroundings. So I think that's where we learned quite a lot.
Yeah.
Less about the training itself, more about all the things around training, everyday life, I guess. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that would be
so
my key takeaway.
I mean that's something we can actually also tell. I think that's a big topic that Scott and I talk about, or that we try to optimize, which could actually help a lot of other triathletes as well. I think because triathletes there are a lot of triathletes who tend to do a lot of things in the same
Take a
24 hours
letter.
as other people. Yeah. Um,
No, okay. Then I would take this point to kind of go on towards the next question, because obviously racing the World Cup is a lot of stress because you have to travel to a lot of races. Some races are back to back. And basically, if you look at the entire
yeah,
calendar, it is the races are not all compromised into one short time slot.
that was actually my
But
point.
very good, very good. But there isn't that much time between the races. It's usually like 2, sometimes 3 or 4 weeks at most. But essentially, from training, you always have to be on a high level, and you don't really have time to peak for every single race. And let me just read how the question was phrased exactly so I don't get it wrong. How do you, as a coach planning a season, or coach an athlete planning a season, how do you schedule and prioritize those races and the training around them to be as fit as possible for every single race?
Maybe beforehand, what I would wish for, maybe someone who is in from the XTERRA organization or whatever is also listening.
I'm sure
What
they
I
are
would
listening.
what I would be dreaming of is a concept that is similar to cycling, for example. So I think it's slowly starting to evolve also in XTERRA and especially in PTO and Ironman racing as well, that you have something like a planned calendar, which is not just like bunch everything together and then see if it works out, but something like, okay, we'll start the tour in Australia, then we're going to Europe, and then we stay in Europe, because this was not the case this year, which I would say is very challenging and money wise, but also stress wise, and then try to go to, for example, US, or I think next year it will be Asia. And I would think that would help a lot of athletes and would make it more fun and more challenging, because then you don't have to make these decisions. Do I go to the US or do I stay and train? Because that was also some kind of issues that we had this year. But yeah, to come to your second question, it depends on your goals, I think. Sorry, again, boring answer, not that easy answer as well. If you are an athlete that is able to, or if your goal is to, for example, win 1 or 2 XTERRA races, then I would say try to focus and peak on these 2 races, and maybe just build yourself up on the other races, or just don't even attend on the races. I mean, some people do that as well. If your goal is to be the highest in the ranking, then depending on how good you are, you have to attend all races or maybe just leave one out or whatever, and be as good as possible every race. So obviously, I think if you're smart, you can already tell which strategies God and I choose. Yeah, I think that's just the way to go, and that's also what a lot of other people in short track racing do when they have to collect a lot of points. Yeah,
Yeah,
traditional
I
and
agree.
boring.
I mean, I like the idea of having the XTERRA World Cup similar to a cycling yearly calendar.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
imagine this, right? I'm just putting this idea out there. What if the World Cup it would start in China, then a week later or something they would have the race in WA in Perth, and then another week later they would have the race in Rotorua, or maybe 2 weeks later or something.
Yeah.
And then you get all the Asia Pacific races out within a compressed time block, so everyone could just go there and travel from one race to another. Then you would go to Europe as the summer starts there, have all of your European races in one block, have UK and Czech and Greece, then maybe have Czech and Molveno a bit earlier. So have Czech in June, for example, with Molveno. And then after you go towards the US and you finish off with Oak Mountain and maybe, I don't know, South American race or whatever, but similar to that. That would be so cool, and it would be a lot more convenient for traveling.
Yeah, I
But
think
yeah,
I think the way you do that is by having more races. So I imagine the way the UCI does that is obviously you still have races in Australia happening throughout the entirety of the season, right? Because it's not just the professionals who race the top World Tour races, but you get the designation of the World Tour races only, or basically you're incentivizing them to have them at a certain period in the calendar, right? Same with the races in Canada, same with the races in China, and the majority of them in Europe throughout the summer. So
Yeah.
that makes sense, but you kind of have to have the races happening the entire time of the year. And I think it's because Xterra, maybe compared to the UCI, is maybe a little bit less invasive in terms of like the organizing.
who knows? But I mean, that's a topic for a whole other discussion. Just
I think
remind me where.
everything just has to grow. I think it's just a normal process and it takes time.
Yeah.
Let me just check where we were. So yeah, we got the thing with the long season. Okay.
Well, my comment on that would be,
Yeah.
in terms of
Give us
growth,
your opinion, Oliver. Come on.
in terms of growth, I think Xterra is really well positioned. Look at the numbers of triathletes that are growing in the last couple of years. Triathlon's becoming a tremendously popular sport. And if you look at some of the racing, I think Xterra is so fun to watch and so fun to participate in. And the culture is really great. So there's really no reason not to do it if you're an athlete, unless you don't know about it. I understand that it can be maybe a little bit scary with like the mountain biking because the courses are really difficult, really challenging. But I think as a product, it has so much potential.
I agree.
We should put this scene on the Xterra side. It's very good, I think.
I mean, no, I agree. It has a lot of potential. It would be great if
Yeah,
more
you're
races
right.
would be televised. That would be,
Mm-hmm.
that would be great. Anyhow, Ollie, do you have any more questions pertaining to training for Xterra specifically?
We could do like a quick fire round, right?
Okay,
Where we just,
fire away, fire
yeah,
at will.
like just let's do the Instagram questions, and let's just do a really fast answers. So I'll
Oh,
start with the
okay.
first one. The first one is: does optimal training for Xterra exist? Yes or no?
The
Yes.
idea of a quick fire question is that you get a quick answer.
Yeah.
Come on,
I
it's
have
an
to
easy
say yes.
question.
I would say yes, because
There
why
you go.
not?
Yeah, there you go. Okay, yeah, question answered. Very good. Where is the true performance limit in endurance sport?
I cannot answer that with yes or no, but
No,
I would
you're
say.
allowed to answer more than
You're
just
allowed to
yes or no.
answer
It's an
whatever you
open
want.
Ah,
question.
okay. I didn't know that. I understand that I have to say yes or no. But with the true performance limit, I think is it in which relation? So, for example, in a time relation or in which context?
We have to ask your under 23 group boys.
Yeah, yeah. From
It's
my
from them. Shout out to LSPS and memes on Instagram.
I have a good follow up to that.
yeah.
What
Just
is the
ask a follow
next
up.
breakthrough? So we're experiencing, what maybe somebody would call a carbohydrate revolution, right? We had
Yeah,
a huge breakthrough in tech in the last years. What's the next unexplored area? Is it heat training?
I think it's not unexplored. I think maybe it will be more commercial with heat training. But what I'm also interested in is sweat rates currently. But I would say as now I'm going away from XTERRA, I would say aerodynamics probably because it's not that achievable to every pro athlete currently, I think. But what I have heard is that they are all just they have all that nobody's talking anymore about thresholds or anything because they all maxed everything out what they could, but not aerodynamics.
So you think the most potential is in aerodynamics on the bike, probably,
Yeah,
right?
definitely on the yeah.
Okay. We have a question. We've briefly gone into this question, but maybe you can provide a very quick answer to it regardless. How to combine XTERRA and normal triathlon training?
I think there's not that much to combine. Just go on your mountain bike and try to improve your technical skills, and then you should be fine.
There you go. And finally, this should be quite easy to answer. Heat training with a core sensor. That means yes, no, maybe. That's
Um,
the question. I think you can say more than just yes, no, and maybe. But
yeah,
yeah,
definitely a yes, because when you do it without, I don't think there's any yeah, you don't have a benefit from it, or you will probably die. Or um,
yeah, you will cook yourself
Scott
to
Scott
death.
Scott can tell you some stories about cooking. um, yeah, I think you can also do it with a is it term what is it in English, Scott? The
A
basic
thermometer.
thermometer.
You can put a thermometer up your bum.
Yeah, obviously you
Uh,
will.
no,
Yeah,
but I
but you
think
can
realistic. Yeah, go
yeah
ahead.
you can also use that, but then you have to. Nah, you don't have to back calculate it because it is your actual core temperature. But I would always use a core sensor. Invest the money
It's not that
if you do.
expensive.
Yeah, but it's always a question if you should do it or not, because
Yeah,
heat
but
training
that's a
is
whole
yeah.
other jar whether or not it makes sense. Okay, those were all the
My
quick fire
my
questions we
last
got.
question. My last
Ah,
question
okay.
is: if you could have a training session with anybody, dead or alive, right? You ride side by side, or you can coach, or you can have a conversation. Whatever. Who would it be?
That's a good question. Maybe I would pick Gustav Eden. I really like him.
Good answer. Good answer. I think that's all from our side. I think this podcast is really interesting, Felix. I think what you guys are doing with Scott is really cool. I really wish you the best for next season. I hope
Thank you.
you guys can step the game up, as you said, as that's the goal. And yeah, Scott, anything else from our side?
No, I don't think so. Maybe a quick apology to everyone who was expecting one big breakthrough answer to the question of how to train for XTERRA. After all, I I'm pretty convinced it's quite similar to middle distance training with only nuances in the difference. Same as Felix. Maybe we can get somebody on the pod here who absolutely disagrees with that. But yeah, I think this was a good episode. If you're interested in what we are doing, give Felix a follow. We will It's at Felix Koebcke on Instagram. I will put his handle under the description of the podcast. You can find it on our Instagram page, or you just follow me and you'll see him pop up on my Instagram feed as well. Other than that, there's not
Nice.
much left for us other than to wish you a happy new year, probably. I hope you've all had a good Christmas, and thank you, Felix, for coming on and waffling on for us for the better part of an hour.
Thank you for having me, guys. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, guys, for listening. Ciao, ciao.